I'm stuck in quarantine with COVID, so I turned this and this into this. Got an update to my quarantine photography series. So while I'm stuck in my bedroom office at home with COVID, don't worry, mild case, I'm doing pretty good. Got enough energy to shoot. But anyway, I don't want to be stuck here doing nothing, so I decided that I'm going to be shooting the whole time I'm in quarantine. And I made a video called Quarantine Photography Tips on about 7 different strategies that you can use to be more creative if you're stuck at home and think you have nothing to shoot. Alright, and these are the 3 photos that I made today, and I'm going to get into how I did it. So in that quarantine photography tip video, I talked about creative restriction, which is sometimes you get more creative when you have less to be creative with, because that forces you to think outside the box and be creative. So I'm stuck in my room, I have nobody to shoot. I'm used to shooting people. I can't shoot any people because they're not allowed to be 6 feet or less with me, right? So what can I shoot? How about old camera? A different subject. I haven't shot a still life forever. So it's forcing me to be a little bit different and shoot still life. Then I'm also not in a great location, big studio, I'm in a bedroom. So I have to be a little bit creative and use what is available to me. So I made these 3 photos using 3 different techniques of things that I observed. Alright, so one thing that's really fun about photography is to do what I call photo hacking, which is where you're kind of just taking stuff you wouldn't think of as photography and just kind of being creative with it. So some different ways that you can hack is looking at lighting, looking at objects, looking at props, like just try to find things that you can manipulate to get some cool special effects out of. So one of the location hacks I used was using harsh lighting coming through a window. Second hack I did was using water bottles and colored gels to try to make some cool, interesting bokeh backgrounds. My laptop screen as a nice, shiny, reflective surface. Look, there's 2 of me. And then I found some artwork in my office, and I use that as background as well. So anyway, I got 3 different photos. I'm going to walk you through how I made each one. So the first one, so I started the day knowing, okay, I got to do something photography-wise. I need to take a photo of this as my subject. So looking around the room, I want to try to see what inspires me, and I noticed I got some really hard light come through the window, making some interesting shapes on the carpet. So I put the camera on the carpet in those light and shadows and try to use the geometry of that light and shadow to try to make some cool abstract shapes for some art. And I know, because it's carpet and it's sunlight and you can see the texture on both sides, that I'm going to need to edit it later to really boost this contrast, but knowing that there's harsh contrast with the light shows me that I have potential. Alright, so after manipulating the geometry of that light, this is what I came up with for my first shot, right? And I noticed it was a hard fall off between the shadows and the light, and then here's the unedited version. And this is also a cell phone shot. So one of my first challenges was to actually try to take all of these photos with a cell phone as well, to kind of really emphasize that creative restriction. Like, what if I don't have all my camera gear? So anyway, the first shot was just cell phone. And the best way to get better photography out of your cell phone is to really get good light, and that's why when I saw this hard light on the floor, I decided to go with it and see what I can make. So here's the unedited version. You can see the contrast, and then when I pull it into Lightroom, pull the shadows and the blacks way down, I pull the whites and the highlights up, it creates that really sharp contrast and makes just this abstract geometrical shape. But as I'm looking at it, I notice I don't really like the carpet texture. This would look so much better if it was just white on black, I think. It's kind of neat. It's kind of really a little bit grungy, a little bit different. But I noticed I don't like the carpet, so what else can I do? So I had this briefcase in my office using what you have available, and it's black, so I figured it would help emphasize the shadows. And then, so now you've got a much different texture. I'm able to get a little bit cleaner texture, I think. Also, this rippled texture is catching the hard light, and it kind of goes along with the camera. So I just tried a few different compositions. Maybe center focus is a little bit better. Turned out pretty good for cell phone pictures. And then my final one, I think this is the one I like best. I like how it's diagonals of light. I don't know, the texture kind of matches the camera. Kind of cool. So here's the before and the after. And this is just from playing. When you see hard light, lots of contrast, that could be a great opportunity to hack your location. So even though all I had was carpet in a briefcase, I was able to make this thing look kind of cool. So I was kind of happy with my first attempt, especially considering these were all cell phone. This is my Google Pixel 2, and that's the quality of work that I was able to create. Alright, so that's photo number 1. Photo number 2 was a little bit more creative, and so this is where I actually got into more of the photo hacking and trying to see what can I make from scratch. And I've got a pile of water bottles because I've been drinking water all day. I'm not allowed to go down to the sink and fill up a glass. And I thought, can I make something out of these? So I got the wheel spinning, and what I decided is maybe I could use these as a Bokalicious backdrop for this. So I shook up a little bit of the water in the water bottle, try to add a little bit more of a Bokalicious texture, and then I made a 2-layer stacked tower here, stacked up the water bottles to make a nice wall of plastic. And I put the blue video light behind it so that that nice color blue shines through the plastic. So I have this video light here. I actually have a gel that doesn't fit it. It's a little bit too big, but it didn't matter. Just putting it behind, turning it on, and I put it horizontal behind the camera, and I wanted it to be centered behind the camera so that the brightest spot would be behind the subject. It works out perfect. That is about the same shape, so it's going to be a perfectly bright highlight around the camera, and then hopefully get enough spill into the water bottles to light them up and turn them blue so that they make a cool bokeh-licious effect. Again, I didn't want to deal with carpet, so I put the freshly clean laptop screen on the ground so I'd have something nice and shiny to be in front of the camera or to reflect the camera. Alright, so this is where we're at so far. If you were to expose for the background first, you can see what the background bokeh-liciousness will look like. This is a cell phone shot, so you're going to notice that there is a little bit of definition. And then I need a light for the subject, which is the camera. So I had some buckets lying around, and I put those on each side of the camera, and then I laid over an LED light wand on top and in front of the brownie cam so that it would be illuminated. It worked out great that the buckets were black because they kind of prevented from a lot of extra light bouncing back and washing out the reflective surface, so that was good. So here you can kind of see the overall setup. And then I did actually get a delivery from Aperture Rent after I started shooting this second video, so I was able to do it with my camera and cell phone, and I'll show you to compare. As you notice, the cell phone version is struggling a little bit. Oh, and it was also, the blue wasn't super deep, so then I added another black briefcase, the black briefcase behind the water bottles so that it would be darker and more saturated and deeper color. But the problem with your cell phone is you don't have a very shallow depth of field. So what I did to get around that is two things: by getting really close to something, or you can zoom in, or you can turn it on portrait mode. So what I did to get the cell phone to work, so I backed up and then zoomed in, allowed the background to have a chance to blur a little bit because of the zoom, even though it's mostly digital cropping, so it's probably not having that much of an effect. But then I turned on portrait mode, and the portrait mode helped automatically blur out the background. So it almost works. You can see a little definition here, as you can see at the bottom with the water bottles. But even with just the cell phone, just using lighting and manipulating lighting, you can come up with some cool stuff. So now I rented a brand new A7C with a Sony Zeiss 50mm 1.4, and I was able to try this out. I'm hoping by having a 50mm, I'm able to get in kind of close, and having that 1.4, that those water bottles get super bokeh-licious. By getting super blurry, you won't be able to tell they're water bottles, and hopefully they'll just be sparkly blobs of blue light. Alright, so here's the overall setup and then the final shot. Got the blue background light, you got the nice illumination on the camera, the reflection from the laptop, and then through the viewfinder you can see it all coming together nicely. Good solid reflection there, and then the horizontal version. To make the water bottles fill the frame for the horizontal one, I actually pushed the camera closer to the water bottles because when I turned the camera sideways, the edges didn't have very much blue in it. But anyway, pretty cool effect. Pretty cool that I went from just my bedroom floor. I was able to go from this to this. The before, the after, pretty cool. Again, as an example of being creative with limited resources, doing photography hacking based on what do you have available. I had a bunch of water bottles. I happen to have a couple of video lights. I have a little camera. What can I make? And then my last shot, super simple. And I'm looking around, what is something in my room, something that has potential at a background or something interesting to put the camera in. And it just so happens that I have a one-of-a-kind handmade Katie Van Hoff piece of art. Is a good friend of mine. She's an amazing artist. Check her out, Katie Van Hoff on Instagram. See some incredible art. I said, well, how perfect. I've got this poster behind me, this art that's in my backdrop here of vintage cameras, and I have a vintage camera. Why don't I just put the vintage camera on the art full of vintage cameras? That's what I was gonna do. I want this to be a relatively flat, even light, so I had to kind of problem solve here. How could I set this up in such a way that I get relatively even light, even though I'm going to be having to use a video light to brighten up the scene? And so what I did was, for the setup, real simple, I have a white cabinet here, so I put the art next to the white cabinet and then pointed my video light over the art so that it would bounce off the cabinet and kind of feather its way onto the art so it wouldn't directly hit it and get really bright, shiny spots. So super simple setup here. You got the light bouncing around, filling in the frame. Here's the result. Just a simple piece of composition. This wasn't good enough. I felt like this was really simple. What else could I do to be creative? Because the whole idea is think outside the box. Always ask, what else can I do? This is a super simple, clean shot. Love it. But let's try one more thing. And I noticed there's a reflection on the cabinet. So I just moved the art right next to the cabinet so that I can try to get some type of symmetrical reflection and see how that turns out. So I cropped it nice and tight. Try to balance it out symmetrically. Try to make something a little bit more abstract. You got the clear side and the blurry side. Here's the unedited. You can see just real simple, interesting composition, and that I decided to play with the duality here. And when I edited it, I made one side warm, one side cool, and I think it turned out kind of interesting. So there it is for my first quarantine stay-at-home photography project. The first 3 photos I made today of some still life using creative restriction. Hope you enjoyed them. Hopefully you found some inspiration to play around and do some photography at home, even if you're stuck in quarantine. Try to hack your environment. Try to hack some random crap you have around your house, like water bottles, whatever, and try to make something pretty. Try to make something cool. Try to make something fun. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe so you can get more behind the scenes videos to see what else I make up while I'm in quarantine. I'm Joshua Grasso. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.